In Matthew chapter 24, verse 13, Jesus told us that he who endures until the end shall be saved. When we look into the Greek of the word endure, it directly translates to suffers patiently. And we're often taught in the churches especially that when you're living for Christ, that your life should smooth out and go well, and that things will be in line. And a lot of preachers and teachers teach us that if things are going bad in your life, or if you're dealing with suffering, you're dealing with struggles, you're dealing with physical ailments and things like that, that you're living in sin, that there's sin in your life that needs to be removed. Because if you were truly living for God, you wouldn't be dealing with suffering. And that's not how it works at all. It's not how it's ever worked in Scripture. You can look at example after example, whether it's Job in the Old Testament, who followed God better than anybody else on earth at the time. And God allowed him to be tempted by Satan in the worst conceivable way for a long time before he was able to come out of that and have more than he ever had after he passed that test. You look at Elijah in 1st and 2nd Kings, who had to do a job for God that included killing 400 servants or prophets of Baal with the sword. And after he did that, he ran out into the desert, and for 40 days and 40 nights, he wanted to die. He laid there wanting to die. You look at the suffering that true servants of God have actually gone through, and we ask ourselves, why is that? Why do we have to suffer in order to serve God in the way he's calling us to do? I can give you example after example from my life. And it's like every time I do something or do a slew of things that God has called me to do directly, and I do them, right then and thereafter, oftentimes I fall into a state of very uncomfortableness, whether it's attacks from the enemy, whether it's bad decisions sometimes I make, but there is a lot of suffering involved with serving God. It's not all roses and sunshine. And I have with me today Alison. Alison is a servant of God trying to learn right now exactly what her calling is in God. And she's been a follower of my channel, she told me, ever since my old Beast System Revealed channel. And she emailed me actually on July 7th of this last year. And I never saw the email. And I recently rejoined Twitter. And she found me on there, and she's like, just the other day, she messages me, she's like, Travis, I sent you an email on July 7th. And I'm like, I totally missed it. And I read it, and I saw right away that this is somebody that God is going to be using to build the kingdom at the end of the age. And so I want to introduce you to Alison. And Alison, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to Christ, how you found my channel even, and how the messages you've learned that God has brought to you through me have worked to build you to where we are right now and to where you are right now. So you can kind of start there.
Sure. Thanks, Travis. So I grew up in Florida, and I was a Christian, but I didn't know the Lord personally. He was just a faraway God. So I felt like I could kind of do whatever I wanted because he was going to forgive me. Scripture didn't really hold a lot of meaning. I had learned a lot of Scripture growing up in the church, but it didn't hold a lot of meaning because I hadn't ever walked in it. And again, I felt like a faraway God. By the time I was a teenager, I started using drugs with friends, and I came upon New Age, and, they say to test the spirits. Well, I was a very young Christian, and this is important to say because New Age is prevalent right now. And I saw God talked about a lot. I saw love and beautiful and forgiveness and all of these things that made me feel good inside.
Right.
But I started getting into my Bible at the same time, and I had a New Age book. It was Marianne Williamson, all these prayers. And the kids that I used to do drugs with, we're all just trying to fill a hole, an empty hole. And the kids I was doing drugs with, they all felt empty inside. And so, we were friends. That's how I ended up starting. And so they would come to me, and I would read them these prayers from this book by Marianne Williamson. Mm-hmm. And I started reading my Bible as well, specifically Psalm 91, the protection prayer, because somebody had told me that if you read Psalm 91, God will protect you.
That's interesting, because with Psalm 91 specifically, because, and I'll let you, I don't mean to interrupt, but when you said that, because through my ministry, I've found that a lot of people coming out of the New Age hear my message and they're like, whoa, what is this? This is different. And I've talked to several people up to and including 3 days ago who said the same exact thing, that when they first kind of began to understand who God is coming out of the New Age, she was taken directly to Psalm 91. Same one. So
that's amazing. And I guess also because Psalm 91 is a bridge, because, you know, especially when you're doing drugs, you are very aware that the wrong or too much or bad situation, you could die. So while it seems like an oxymoron to be using drugs and to be, you know, reading your Bible, you have to remember that people that are using drugs, they're just trying to fill something like everybody else, whether it's food or sex or whatever. They're just trying to fill something, and that's their thing. Oh, I just made it this fine. I don't mean anything by that. Sorry. I just realized I did it. So I was reading the protection prayer every single day, and I was out changing the oil. So at this point, I'm like 19. I was married to, that doesn't really matter. I'm no longer married to him. So I was 19. I was out changing the oil. Now, he worked during the day. I worked at night as a waitress. And I got under my car. I did the jack up to lift the car. Uh-huh. I didn't put the emergency brake on. So I got under the car to pull and the car fell on me. And there's like nobody there. It's an apartment complex in the middle of the day and a weekday. I am screaming. I've got my feet trying to like push the car up off me. Nothing. I mean, I really, to be honest, I thought I was going to die. All of a sudden, the car lifts off me. I get out from under the car, and it's like this very frail-looking, like, Asian guy. And he put the car back. I don't even know where he went. I never saw him again. I'm not saying it's an angel. I'm just saying I don't know who this is.
I'm not saying it's not. A young kid. I'm not saying it's not an angel.
Yeah, I really don't know. Yeah. So I'm taken to the hospital. The only thing I have wrong with me is a little cut, an exterior cut on my ear. Nothing is wrong. My ex-husband's dad was a doctor, and he came to visit me in the hospital later that day, and he hands me a piece of paper, and he says, one of the nurses in my practice asked me to give this to you. I opened it up. It was two hands praying, and it said Psalm 91 protection prayer. Even now, it gives me chills every time I think about it.
Wow.
But that is what made me realize God's real. Like, it's not religion. Mm-hmm. He cares about me. And so I started digging and realized that New Age never talks about Jesus. There's no talk about Jesus. And you'll hear that with any New Age. And again, because it's prevalent right now, I see it everywhere I look on Twitter and everywhere else. There is no talk about Jesus. There's no salvation for your soul. It's empty. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I had always been saved. Again, I was no more, a Christian. Because I really didn't. Anyway, I'll just go forward because it'll make more sense. Mm-hmm. We were very poor, and I'm a people pleaser by nature. And I people please to my own detriment. And all the way till now, although it's a different kind. It's my kids now. But so I had done back in the 90s, a booty shake contest, and I had won the contest. And it was for a calendar, and I'm from Florida. I think I may have said that. I'm from Florida, and so South Florida, they had these contests in the 90s. It was for a calendar. So they would have a few girls for the months. I think I went with March and September, and I was February. Mm-hmm. And we went and did our photo shoot. Well, Miss March and I were both very poor, and Miss September was a stripper. And actually, I come to find out all of the girls were strippers, except for Miss March and I, who we had become friends at this point. And so she starts talking to us about all the money you can make. Needless to say, I took drugs and went and started stripping. And when my ex-husband, he really wasn't interested in me as a human, which isn't why we're married any longer, but he was very interested in the money I could make. And so I started stripping. And
that was at what age?
I'm ashamed. I don't want to.
Early 20s?
I was 20. Yeah, I was 20. I did it for about a year, and I was 20. And I started with Topless, but the money wasn't in Topless. The money was in much more than that.
Right.
And so, so I started doing that, and it is. Like $1,000 a night you could be making.
Wow.
But of course you feel empty. You're embarrassed. You don't want to tell anybody. It's embarrassing.
I would imagine though, the more you do it, like you probably get numb to that and just kind of get used to that feeling. And the emptiness is more of a numbness overall. Yeah.
I had to drink or smoke weed. There's no way I could do it sober, And so this was the turning point. I was on the stage, and I had a garter on, and a gentleman came up. You got all the girls up there dancing, and he comes up to put $1 in my garter, and he stops, and he looks me in the eyes, and he said, "You're too good for this. You shouldn't be here." And I was, angry. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. But it didn't leave me. It ate at me that he said that, because I never saw him again, didn't saw him before. He didn't know my name. My pretend name. And at this time, I was going to church with my grandmother every Sunday. She had no idea what I was doing, but she is the person who showed me such deep love all of my life, and I trusted her. So even though I didn't want to go to church and I would have a hard time sleeping, I'd be sleeping mostly through it. It meant a lot to her, so I went. And one Sunday, the pastor told a story. And the story was about the owner of a brothel. And he says to the head girl, "I'm going on a trip. I'm going to be gone for a bit. Just hang on, and I'll be back." And so he goes, and then he doesn't come back, and she's concerned. And so she goes to find him, and she does. And when she finds him, he says, "I'm never going back to that, because I found something that's worth so much more in my life." And at that moment, and I told you this in the text, Travis, God spoke to me. I realized it wasn't audible, but it felt and sounded audible. The whole church was nobody else was there. You see in the movie, it's a shining light. That's what it felt like. Everything else disappeared. And he said to me, "What are you doing with your life?" And I was broken. Not only had he protected me, but now, he was in my face, and I knew it was him.
You felt the voice of God saying, "What are you doing with your life?" So basically, he had come to you in a pretty strong way when you were 19, and then you just completely didn't follow that path at all at that time. You just continued on, got into this life, and now he's coming to you again, 2-3 years later? What are you doing with your life? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And that was it. I went directly to my grandmother, and I told her everything I was doing. And I told her I needed to confess, I needed to get right with God, because he was calling me. And I stopped everything, and I was scared. I was making $1,000 a night. So what was I going to do?
How do you replace that?
Yeah. Because I wasn't making him money, right? But it didn't matter. I knew he was calling me, and I was listening. So I quit everything. I quit drugs. I quit stripping. I quit everything. And my ex-husband stopped coming home. And so when he stopped coming home...
Is that the pig I'm hearing in the background?
Yeah, you hear the pig.
Yeah. It almost sounds like a child crying. Oh, there they are. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, they want more snacks. They're not satisfied from feeding them before we started. At that point, he stopped coming home, and I was being told he was cheating on me. And so after he didn't come home 2 nights in a row, I picked everything up, and I drove to my parents' house in Ohio. They had just moved to Ohio a little bit before that. And then we tried to work it out, but he was also physically abusive. So I ended up joining the Navy, and that's what brought me to Virginia.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of the story of how I ended up in where I'm at now.
Mm-hmm.
And so from here, did you want me to talk about how I ended up finding you?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a gap there between all of that and now. And I know you've gotten remarried. You've got a wonderful husband who's very supportive of you. And so, how long have you been married to him now?
I have. So there was another husband that I was married to, which is the father of my kids. With him, he is part of the opioid problem. He was given painkillers, and it turned into a massive addiction, and so that's why we're not married anymore. And so I was a single mom at that point for 6 years, from the time my youngest was 2, who's now 13. And then my husband, George, who you were just speaking of, he and I have been married for 5 years.
Okay.
And he is, like I told you, the most godly human I've ever met. I mean, he loves the Lord, strives for the Lord. I mean, I just learned so much from him. And with the decision, so I started getting sick a few years ago, and it was because of him that I was able to.
Well, before you get into that, let's reverse a little bit.
Okay.
So after you got that calling almost audibly, like you said, and you don't hear it, but it's in your spirit, and you know it's coming from God. What are you doing with your life? From you and I talking, I know that you don't even right now necessarily know what your specific calling is. Am I correct?
I'm searching. Yeah, I'm searching.
Right. And so through that time then, up until when you met your husband and married him 5 years ago, what would you say your relationship with God was through those years leading up to what we're going to talk about in the last 2.5 years that you've been through?
Okay, so, with any relationship, it's, up and down and, very dependent on the time that you spend. So I spent 10 years active duty Navy, and during the first 5 years when I was on a ship, you're pretty much isolated. I mean, you're surrounded by the people on the ship, but that's really it. So I was very close to the Lord. I would get up every single morning and just spend time listening to his voice. I had a journal. I would speak to him and then just listen and write down what he was laying on my heart. After 5 years, that's the distinction there is I started having kids. And so once I started having kids, of course, as a mom, things are hard. Just because your time is taken. And my kids are stair steps. I had each 2 years apart. And so during that time, I've never walked away from the Lord in that sense, but there's been times when it's that dry and weary land where you feel like when you pray, I know exactly. Not sure, but you even hear him or he hears you. Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. With me, and it was a similar path for me, as you know, and as followers of my channel that I've talked about, where I went through almost a 25-year period like that. It wasn't like I never walked away from God. I mean, I wasn't living for him in any way, and I mostly only went to him during those times when things were real bad or when I needed something. And it just kind of became that, where there wasn't really the relationship. And most of the time I felt like I was like screaming into a canyon and wasn't being heard, but I knew I was.
Yeah.
And so what's important, I think, that all of us need to understand when we go through these periods of time, my calling from God came when I was 17. I'm 46. I didn't start doing what I'm doing until about 3.5 years ago, but really about 1.5 years ago. And so it's like, and I'm sure you've experienced the same, where through all of those years of God kind of being in the back of your mind more so than at the forefront, those life experiences all build toward where he's ultimately calling you to go and calling you to do. And so I think people It's the last video that I made on this channel talked a lot about that, and that people, when they come to God, they think right away, well, God's calling me to serve. What do I do? What do I do? And start spraying themselves around ineffectively because they're little baby Christians. They haven't lived yet. They haven't lived through, regardless of your age. You could be 60 years old and just come to Christ. You're a baby again. You're born again. You're literally a baby, and you don't even know how to crawl yet. And when I started serving, finally, 3.5 years ago, but like I said, really a year and a half ago, with the real message he wanted me to share, it was the first time that I felt so. I had so many conversations with him. I'm like, God, I wasted so many years. I could have been doing this stuff for you. And he kept saying to me over and over again, no, Travis, you didn't waste them. It's what you had to go through to get you here.
Joseph.
Yep. And so you have to go through major, major struggles. And the people closest to me know exactly what those were. And I wouldn't be able to do what I do for God, which I'm still just barely beginning. Without having gone through those. So I want you to talk about kind of what your career was up to about 2.5 years ago, and then what happened to you 2.5 years ago that has kind of led you now where you are, where you're just now starting, like you've been telling me, just in the last month, I'm just starting to come out of it. So kind of talk about that.
Sure. So after I left the military, that was 2009. I got picked up shortly after for a government position with the federal government. I was attached to Norfolk, Virginia, so I live in that area, Hampton Roads. I got picked up as a financial management analyst, and which I'm terrible at math unless it's money. Anything that's budgetary, I mean, and I really enjoy it. So over the next 12 years, I did that, and, you end up applying for increasingly more pay and more responsibility. And so I started as a GS9, for those who are familiar with general schedule. And when I left, I was a GS13, and I was a supervisory financial management analyst at a comptroller's office in Norfolk. And already, I think because of the divorce, and I was telling Travis earlier, I was always life of the party, social butterfly. I didn't know a stranger. And to be honest, I don't know at this point, and I may not this side of heaven know what happened, but I became anxious and struggled with depression. And
just kind of seemingly out of
American medical. Yeah. And it started happening with my marriage.
Okay. So this was your second marriage before, yeah. And you were telling me even just for people to understand context of what she lost through this. She was telling me earlier, like, you were making six figures even at that time. Like, you had a very lucrative career.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So the doctor put me... So I was married to my children's father for 12 years, and that ended in 2013. So in 2013, it had become scary. And again, I know that what happened with him, and he went to drug treatment. I think he's starting to do better. But the doctor put me on Adderall. And I want to say up front, with what I know now, I would never go on a pharmaceutical. But at the time, and it's a mask, and that's the issue, is that the American Medical Association is just going to mask. Nothing is being fixed. So underneath, you're just getting worse and worse and worse, and it's piling up. And so from 2013 until, what are we in, 2023? So it was last February 27th. Of 2022 was the last day at work. And I had just becoming increasingly sick. Not being able to function. The brain fog I had was so thick that I was struggling just with concepts. And I was so tired that it really didn't matter how much sleep I got. I was bedridden. And I'm a goal setter. I'm a go-getter. I'm a checking off the boxes and making things happen. And I could not. I could not. To be honest, I really have only started doing that again in like this past month, because it's been such a long road with understanding what is wrong and how to fix it, you know, and I'm still learning. You know, I really believe it's more than one thing. But back when I quit work, I was homeschooling the kids because of the whole COVID thing, and we were teleworking, and my job said, well, everybody's got to come back. You know, they're lifting everything and come back. Well, I mean, my kids are middle and high, so I didn't want to make them go back in the middle. And I said, well, can you work with me? But because I'm a supervisor, I was a supervisor, they said no. So George and I, my husband, were very prayerful, because it's a huge step. I was making over $100,000 a year, so massive. He's a small business owner. I mean, small business owners, you're doing it out of joy. You're not making a massive income.
Did he have during COVID? During COVID with his businesses, did he have to shut down and all that and go through that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You said he owns a couple of gyms. He is very
entrepreneurial. Yes, he owns 2 gyms. I don't know if you can see it. It's Fit Bodies Unlimited.
Oh, yeah,
but,
sure.
He is so driven. When he got closed down, he's like, no, we're not doing this. And so because he had to, he set up like mobile units, and he would get it out to all his members, and he'd go out, like a church would have let him come and use their field, and he'd have the members come out and train them out there.
Wow.
So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's the kind of...
It's still a financial, but he's driven.
That's the kind of person, when COVID first started, I didn't start doing my online ministry till right after COVID started. It was March 17th of 2020 that I launched my first B System Revealed channel, and it was like he was the kind of guy that I was trying to get the attention to. Be like, do not comply with this. Keep going. Keep doing it. This whole sham is only going to work if we comply with it. Well, everybody did. And I didn't know at the time what was going on. I thought that if enough of us got together on it all, we could stop it. I didn't realize that it was the first seal of God's judgment, and that nothing could stop God's judgment. And this was just how it was beginning. And it's like the whole world was under a trance. But yeah, it was people like him. If 50% of people, small business owners, would have been like that, it wouldn't have worked, you know. Yeah. So that's cool he was doing that.
Well, and, you know, the big thing is, which I think a lot of people will agree, and I see this a lot on Twitter, I thought viruses were real. Mm-hmm. I thought COVID was real. The whole thing. But it was because of Scripture. My heart was just taken by the idea that we were living out. Something was weird. Something was odd. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And this was around the same time, probably February, March. Mm-hmm. So initially I had some fear because I thought it was real. I didn't know. I was never somebody, like anybody, don't vaccinate your kids. They'd be like, are you crazy? My animals are not vaccinated. Nobody is getting touched with that mess. So, but we didn't know. And I want to say probably the majority. I am the only person I know besides telling you, my uncle and my husband, who are like me. And I've lost family members because I didn't get the shot, and because they thought I was crazy. They thought I was getting drunk.
Yeah, we get people in our world that understand the truth of what's going on and what has been going on. I think often we get a very false sense of how much of a minority we actually are, because we have our little social media bubbles, right? And we have the certain YouTube channels we follow, and it's mostly people that agree with us, you know. But then you go out into the real world and you realize, man, there aren't many like me. There aren't many that know this stuff, you know. And like with the traveling I've done and just talking to regular people, sometimes they look at you like an alien. Like they don't even understand what you're saying. Yeah. What do you mean you didn't get the shot? Everybody got shot. Like, what do you think? You know, still to this day. That's why this round 2 they're gearing up for is going to work. And it's going to work because it's going to not only because mass compliance is the way it goes, but because it is God's judgment, and this is how it's going to go. And people aren't seeing this. I'm seeing it all over social media right now where people are like, we're not complying this time. garbage, because they're going to have the last time was child's play. The last time was happy, happy, joy, joy. We're all in this together, child's play. This time is not going to be that way, and there are going to be real repercussions. When Biden is coming out and saying we're going to have a new vaccine, this one's actually going to work, he says, which is admitting the last one didn't work.
Oh, it is. Oh, it's going to work. Oh, yeah. It's going to work for what they're trying to do, for sure.
And I've seen people that I've known for a long time, like on social media, on Twitter, saying, all of a sudden I'm seeing a lot of people that are actually getting really, really sick, that were never vaccinated, etc. What is going on here? We don't know yet. But yeah, that's kind of a sidebar. But I think if people listening haven't heard this, we are definitely in for round 2 of this, and it will work. And so we need to be ready for what the repercussions are, and expecting they could be the worst of the worst. I was talking to somebody last night even saying, it's easy to say you're not going to comply. What happens when the National Guard shows up at your door with needles and says, if you don't take it, we're taking you away? How strong is your resolve in that case? I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not trying to fearmonger, but I'm saying we have to be prepared for the worst of the worst in this scenario. And also realizing, as I've been saying for over a year now, and we're going to need it now more than ever, that the Spirit is going to have to direct us through this strategically, day by day, moment by moment, because it's not time yet for us to be gone. If you follow my channel, you know what the timeline is. So, but that's a sidebar, but it's a really important thing to understand, because it's coming quick. It's coming quick. So anyway, continue with.
And may I ask you a question on that real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Because you said something, I don't know if it was in the part 2 or the 7s, I'm not sure. But you said something. Now, so my uncle, he was asking me about the end times. He's a new Christian. And he's scared. And I said, somebody asked me, and I said, what I'm not sure about is God's judgment occurring according to what was prophesied because it was prophesied, or is that those in command are following the Bible, which you had mentioned, are following the Bible, the book, they're following what's going on, and trying to rush it. So it's almost like that chicken and an egg. That's what's confusing to me. Is it because God prophesied it and they're...
It's both. And the reason it's both is because God the Father is the creator of all things, right? He's the creator even of all things that are evil now and that turned against him. And as I talk about, he gave the world over and the systems of the world over to Satan to run. However, being that Satan himself is a subject of the Father ultimately, and like in the story of Job, he had to go to God and ask permission. Can I test Job, right? He has to follow the spiritual guidelines set forth by the Creator. He has to. And everybody that he's directing has to as well. So the way prophecy works, and once you understand this, it further doubles down for me the reality of God, because some people look at it a different way, though. I've heard people say this. I've heard people say that the rulers of the world have been planning this for centuries, which they have, and that they're the ones who wrote Scripture, and they wrote it to follow it later on and to try to trick us into thinking it's prophecy and it's of God, so that we will eventually submit to it. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. I know, because as we were talking about earlier, when the Spirit of God is speaking to you, you know it. And so the prophecy of the revelation of Jesus Christ was inspired by the Spirit. I have no doubt in my mind. And when you go into the Old Testament, into like Zechariah and Isaiah and Daniel and these other books, and how they all align to the same concepts for the end of the age.
Right.
So really what's happening is the rulers of the world, under the guidance of Lucifer, are trying to follow exactly how prophecy plays out at the end of the age, because they have to, but deep down, they still believe they can beat it. That's their goal, to actually defeat it. And people always say, well, why does Satan try so hard when he knows he's already lost? I do not believe for 1 second that he has conceded defeat, or he wouldn't be doing what he's doing. And he believes that in the 42-month reign that he's going to have to run the earth with no believers left except for the 144,000 and the 2 witnesses, and he believes during that time that he can create some sort of God moment, through using CERN and the black cube and quantum computing and now AI.
Magic.
Yeah, and all kinds of things. I mean, just coming in every direction, where everybody left on Earth at that time won't even be able to hear or see God anymore, because they'll be so melded into all of these things. And so he thinks he can win. He thinks there's a path to victory, but he has to do it along the guidelines that God had set forth.
Which makes sense when you look at Job.
Yeah. Exactly. And also, he has been trying to rush it. He has been trying to rush the timeline. And I've never talked about this on a video, but it was a vision I was given in March of 2022. It was right after I made the very last video I made on the Beast System Revealed channel that you had been following, where I said I'm stepping away, and it was all gone. It was called The Beast Revealed. And the night I released that video, I was still awake at 3 a.m. And God showed me, Travis, although Lucifer has to obey him, has to a certain degree, he don't like it. And so I was starting to learn this first 42-month cycle that we were in, and all that. And God's like, he is going to try to accelerate this to 1 year instead of 3.5 years. That's his goal. And that's why the war in Ukraine, which launched the second seal of judgment, the fiery red horse of war. That's why the war in Ukraine started with such a flurry, so fast, because it was going to be that way. That was the plan of the beast. And basically, God said, nope. 42 months. You got to do this for 42 months. And all of a sudden, the war really slowed down. And people thought Putin was going to overtake Ukraine in weeks. And if that was the case, and if he could have done it all in a year, we wouldn't be here anymore at this point. And so, but God does slow him down. God's given him permission to do this because it's within his judgment, God's judgment. But it's a really.
You think that's why they're bringing COVID back?
Well, COVID's got to come back because when we get into the 4th seal, so like the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th seals all kind of run into each other. Because the 3rd seal is massive hyperinflation, which we're not to yet, but we will be with what's happening.
It feels like we're on the brink, yeah.
Well, and see, what I've been with the BRICS nations, BRICS, what is it, Brazil, Russia, India, China, I don't remember what the S is. It's not Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia just came in. But within the last 2 days, the BRICS nations have more than doubled in size. They're now the BRICS Plus nations. And they said yesterday or the day before that they will no longer be trading in the U.S. dollar whatsoever. They're only going to trade internationally within their own currencies, cutting out the dollar, which is what we've always gone to war for, right? To protect the dollar. And now the gross domestic product of the BRICS Plus nations is $31 trillion, which exceeds the G7 nations now. The G7 nations, which is what we're in, is about, I think, 27 trillion. So they just exceeded us. This is what the world war is going to be. And so this is what's going to cause massive hyperinflation outside of those BRICS nations, which will be us, which is the 3rd seal, where you'll have to work an entire day just to buy some bread, some wheat, and some barley, basically.
Yeah.
And then, but seal 4 then is when everything converges. Disease. Okay, that's why are they bringing COVID back, you're asking? Because within the next 2 years that we still have in this current 42-month timeline, it has to come back. And there's got to be a lot of death due to disease. I think a lot of it is the repercussions of this,
Yeah.
the long-term, the ticking time bomb it is. People still talk about shedding. I don't know about the shedding thing. Could be. But I think there will be some major manufactured diseases that will kill a lot of people. And so in the fourth seal, a quarter of the earth dies through disease, through hunger, through war, through famine, through the beasts of the earth that start killing people, start turning on people even. So COVID was never over. It's just a matter of focusing more on seal 2, which was the war. And then when the war, when the war really erupts worldwide, that's all going to tie into the massive inflation as well. So no, that I think we're going to be stuck for the next 2 years with massive disease. I really do, and genuinely people dying from who knows what at this point. And that's why, and it's so, you talk about this stuff, and I always feel like I'm scaring people or something, and it's not what I'm trying to do. It's like what we need to know right now. It's what we need to know.
Yeah.
You want to know the reality of what you're going to face, or do you want to be blindsided by it? Those are your two choices. Because like Trump said in 2018, nothing can stop what's coming. That's what he said. And the people who follow him want to believe that means, oh, he's gonna, he's a good guy, and he's gonna look like the good guy when all this comes down. But that is the greatest deception. So anyway,
what Christians need to remember. And my uncle and I just had this discussion. Because the hopium is, I was a Trump supporter. I was a Q supporter. Again, it goes back to they did not talk about Jesus, and that sent off the red lights to me that something is not right. They're not talking about Christ. They're not talking about salvation.
They talk about God. They use the word God, and to me, that God is the God of this world. They don't know it. It's the God of this world, Lucifer. And every politician that talks about God, that's the God they serve. Just because you use the word God doesn't mean you're talking about the Creator.
And every actress and... Yep, exactly. And so my uncle...
God.
Yes. Yeah, all of them. Yeah. All of them. And so, we're here on this earth, and until COVID happened, I did not ever have Satan is there. He's roaming the earth. He's got his third angels. I did not realize the prevalence he had in owning this world. I did not. I had no idea. And most people, I think, do not know.
They don't. It's the question.
So that's why when you hear them say God, you think it's our God.
Yep. And it's the question I get the most. I even touch on it on Who Has Got the Midnight Ride Part 2 in one of those segments where I was talking to a guy the night before, and the second God came up, like I said, in Who Has Got, the whole demeanor of the conversation changed. And what he wanted to know, and I've had this conversation with so many people, and I never used to have an answer. Now I do, because of what we're talking about. And if God is so loving, if God is a loving God, why does he allow all these bad things to happen? And as soon as you explain the reality of who's running the world and running the systems of the world, then the only question that could remain is, well, why does God allow that to happen? And then it comes down to, well, he chose us to give us free will. He chose humanity as an experiment that we could have free will. And so with that, Satan, Lucifer, knows he can use our free will against him. And so we have to, and this kind of ties into what we started off talking about. We have to be tested on the most, especially in this age and what we have to face in serving him in this age, we have to be tested in some of the most severe ways and pass those tests and continue to love God and continue to serve God, even though it is hugely unpleasant very, very often. And what that does is it shows God within our free will what our free will actually is. And he looks at our hearts and says, okay, I know Travis will do what I ask him to do. I know he'll do it. His heart is pure in serving me. And as soon as we get there, and we cannot get there until we go through the trials, till we go through the tests. Everyone who's ever served God in Scripture has had to do it, including Jesus himself, who fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and at the end of it all, he was tempted by Satan. And Satan said, I will give you all the kingdoms of the world if you just bow down and worship me. Well, what does that tell you? Who owns the kingdoms of the world? If he can give them to Jesus.
Exactly.
That's not a test. He could have been king right there. He could have been king. And he said, nope. But he had to pass that test. And we all have to go through it. If you're at your darkest point right now, you have to understand anybody who has served God has always had to be there too. And not just once, repeatedly as you grow. And especially as you start to serve. And so as you were talking about over these last few years, where you just had no energy, you couldn't explain it, it just fell on you out of nowhere. I've been through that in spurts, a few weeks to a few months at times, especially in the last year, where I'll do something I know God has called me to do. And immediately thereafter, I start to, when I made the sevens, for example, a year ago in April, I was going through it as I was recording that. I recorded it over the course of 7 days. And every day I was recording, I was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. I could barely put one foot in front of the other. I know you can't tell it when you watch it, but that's where I was at. And when I got done with that last scene on that last day, I edited it down and I was out for a month, for almost a month. I don't know what ran over me. I couldn't do anything. I wasn't sick. I wasn't depressed. I was just out. I was knocked out. And I had to go through that. And I came out of that. And what happened next? Next calling, something bigger, something bigger to do. And I did Who Is God Part 1 over the course of 6 months of traveling and stuff through there. And God just touched it in every way. And I self-funded the whole thing perfectly because he brought every perfect scenario to me through my freelance career. But then again, after that, same thing happened. As soon as I was done, everything fell apart again. I'm like, God, serving you is so hard. It's so hard in this world.
Yeah.
Because our rewards don't come in this world.
No.
So I guess, with what you've been going through, like you said, you've just been coming out of it really in the last month. I feel that, is there more you want to talk about with that, with that time period that you've been?
I was just going to bring it to aware, like what I went through to get to this point, but it sounds like your question may allude to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so basically you're at a point right now, you're coming out of a test for sure, or a preparation for sure, to a certain degree. You were telling me the other day too, or yesterday, how having gone through what you've gone through since losing your job and all of that has actually allowed you to immerse yourself more in learning. In learning about God, in learning about all these things. You probably, for example, would have never come across me if your regular life was going along that way, and the other people you follow and that you've learned from. So it's been preparation for you to first know and learn, right? But clearly it's coming close, I believe, and maybe even just talking to me right now is the beginning of that. And having the courage to do that, which I really appreciate that you have. And for the people watching, you got to know, we weren't even planning on doing this today. We were just going to set up and
test run.
Yeah, do a little test run. And finally, I'm like, you want to just do it now? She's like, sure. I'm like, nobody else would say that.
Let's go. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and so, and that's what serving God is. And I say that a lot, but it's true. Scripture says when you're in the Spirit and you're serving God, you're like the wind, and nobody knows where you're coming from or where you're going or why. Yeah. And when you get a word from God, it's very rarely, I can't think of one time where I've gotten a word of God from something he's calling me to do where he said, okay, Travis, 3 months from now, schedule this. It's like the Spirit speaks to you and you go and you do, and so I'm glad that we were able to do that and get on the same page with that today.
Me too.
Yeah. But I believe that there is something that he's going to strike you with now that you've had the courage to kind of step out a little bit. that he's going to strike you with that's going to make sense. And when the calling comes, that's the thing. Not only does it make perfect sense to you, but you're extremely excited about it. It just aligns with your with your personal passions. Like, I never dreamed like making videos would ever be a passion of mine. But when he started walking me through and teaching me how to do it, almost 2 years ago now, I'm like, this is perfect. But this is perfect for me, God. Like, I didn't know this could be. I'd never seen myself on camera even, and it helped me learn my personality, come across to other people. And it became a passion in and of itself that he's used. And so that's what he does. He uses your talents and your personality. Sometimes it can be under the radar. Sometimes it can be, right in front of people. So do you have any ideas right now from what, in your relationship with God, where you think he might be taking you?
Well, so it's hard to go through trials. I mean, duh, we all know that. It's hard. And when you had really everything taken away, you had spoken about how yours is women, and God had to take it all away. And when he took it all away...
You're talking about like in the sevens, right? My Achilles heel has always been women. Yeah.
I was listening to the sevens last night, right?
Yeah.
And, but how you said, when God took it away and broke you, you didn't go running to find another woman to fill your heart. You took that and you said, God, what do you want me to do? I'm here. I'm yours. I'm good. And you even said it's hard to realize, giving, you may never, but he's worth it. And you know that he's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't come to this place easily. I have been dealing with this. I was first seeing an adrenal specialist, and it's gotten much better, Dr. Neville in Pennsylvania. And, but there's still something else. It's multifaceted. There wasn't just one thing, but I am much better. I would spend days in bed. Mm-hmm. I just didn't have enough energy to get out. And so I've been working with the nutrition detective now. He's on Twitter, and it makes so much sense to me what he says. Again, I'm digging. I'm hungry. And as I get better, I want to just slay the next thing. God, what else? What do I need to focus on? Because it's multifaceted. But it took me a long time to praise God. And I will tell you, and I want anybody to know this that can hear it, it wasn't until I started praising him for feeling bad. And it's hard, Travis. I was doing it through gritted teeth and tears, only because I wanted to honor him. But my heart, I was crushed.
Yeah.
I'm crushed. I've got 3 teenage boys. I have a farm. I've got an awesome husband that's kicking himself. He's working so hard, and he needs a teammate. And I'm not healthy. Once I started praising God, he started changing things. I mean, I'm not kidding. He started changing things, and it was slow. It wasn't like, God, I praise you, and I'm better than... No.
Yeah, it never works that way.
But I could start seeing. No, but with your obedience, you allow him to lead you. And instead of being stuck there pouting, crying because you're hurt and you're upset and you're, why God? Instead, by you giving him praise, because you trust him, he can reach out his hand and you're going to take it. And so I took his hand and I just started walking. And it was really dark. But as I walk, it's wisdom. He grants me knowledge. He grants me wisdom on just how it talks about. He lights the step ahead of you. He's not lighting a mile. I don't know what's a mile, but I know that this is the next step. And,
that's all we ever know. That's all we ever know, that very next step.
Yeah.
You're walking in the dark when you follow the Spirit. You have to, and it's so hard for people because we're socially engineered to be planners, to plan for the future and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you, there's no way to do that. When you're truly following God in the Spirit, there is no planning for the future. And right now, anyway, the way the world is, how do you necessarily plan for the future? Because you don't know what we're going to be blindsided by tomorrow, necessarily. Not to say that you shouldn't have your ducks in a row as much as you can. But when you're really in the Spirit, my calling could take a completely different direction when I stop this recording. God might have something to tell me, and it'll make me more excited than anything, although it might be far more challenging than anything I've done to this point. That's the growth we have to go through while we are learning.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah, no.
I got excited as you were talking. I was just thinking about Joseph, and I said it earlier. He is who I am looking forward to meeting one day in heaven, because that's who the Lord brings to my mind in suffering. Mm-hmm. Everything that Joseph in the coat of many colors, he was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused by the Pharaoh's wife, and he praised God. He took it and he praised God. And look where God brought him. But he had to prepare him. Had he given him that position in the Pharaoh's land 20 years earlier, he wouldn't have had the skills, the maturity, everything else. And I think that's why as I get better, I feel that God's calling me. I just don't know what.
The same, look at Moses even. Moses, he knew his calling right off the bat. And I think of my life when I knew my calling when I was 17, and the exact words I heard in my spirit right when I came to Christ. Travis, I'm calling you to preach the word in a way it's never been preached. I'm like, what does that mean? Holy cow, what on earth? The way it's never been preached. What? And so right away, I just fired off and started preaching. I preached to my English lit class. I stood there because I was assigned, we were assigned a piece of literature from the 1600s. And so I chose the King James Bible because it was translated in the 1600s. And I stood in front of my English class and preached the word, and got kicked out and failed and sent to the principal's office. But then I got called to churches, and I was preaching in churches as a teenager and doing all this stuff. And I just flamed out because I got my calling, but I had no experience or knowledge to go along with it. And I look at what Moses did when he had his calling. Right away, he wanted to do it and go straight to Pharaoh and let the people go. Are you kidding me? And so he had to go live out in the desert for 40 years. 40 years. Yeah. He had a whole separate life before God finally said, now you're ready to go do what I called you to do. Patience in God can be the hardest thing. When I'm not hearing any direction from him on anything to do, I get real impatient, and I want to start doing stuff in and of myself. And I've tried to do those things before, and they're horrible. That's Travis.
That's Ishmael.
Yeah, it's that's Travis right there making a video. That one's Travis. There's no spirit in that, and nobody's ever seen them before. but I know when that happens, and it's delete. That was not of God. So we should probably start to wrap it. I don't even know how long this is going. A while.
Yeah, sorry.
No. I'm more long-winded than you, I'm sure. But I think that, as you do come out of this, and this is for you or anybody else listening that may be going through similar things and don't really know what it is exactly you're supposed to be doing to serve the kingdom, because our time is so short, I'm telling you, all he's looking for right now is a pure heart to serve him, where he genuinely is. It's not like it's God first, and then my husband, and then my country, and all that garbage. It's God is at the center of everything that you think, and everything that, and I'm not sitting here saying I'm perfect with this by any means, not even close. But he knows deep down that is where, if I had to choose between one or the other, from one of my temptations or one of my weaknesses or serving the world again, he knows my choice. He knows my choice now. And so just be there, I guess, is the best thing I can say. Just know that confidently. You can't create that. But when the Spirit's in you, that's what the Spirit's going to do. He's always going to be pointing you directly to the Father and pointing you into the service that the Father's really calling you to do. Have the patience with it, and you'll know when you know. And then, like you were saying earlier, and we both were saying, you'll want to just start doing it right away, because it'll make sense then, because you'll know it's from Him. But be aware too, as you go through the calling, as you just start doing what he's telling you to do, you're going to have doubts about it constantly. And think about John the Baptist, for example, who did what he did and ushered in the first coming of Christ and baptized Jesus, saw the Spirit descend on his head, just like the Father told him he would see, so he would know that was the chosen one. And he saw it with his own eyes. That is the Messiah. And then later on, when Jesus was doing his ministry and John was in jail, he doubted everything he did. He doubted everything. And he sent out people to Jesus to be like, are you really the one, or should we wait for another? John the Baptist, who Jesus called the greatest prophet to ever live, doubted. And so
we're in good company.
Huh?
I said, so we're in good company, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to doubt. Things are going to go wrong. You're going to get disappointments through it all. But when it's from God, you'll know. And you'll run with it. What is, if you want anybody to follow you on Twitter, what is your Twitter handle? Is it an easy one to say, or is it?
It's Daisy Chain with a Z, and I think it's at sign AJ Daisy, DAIZEY.
Okay.
But when it comes up, it says Daisy Chain, and it's got like a little chain of daisies.
Okay.
So,
yeah, and for anybody who doesn't know, definitely follow her. I'm sure she's got a lot more followers than me. I just rejoined Twitter, I don't know, 10 days ago or so. Not even.
I'm so thankful that you did.
And people are finding me that used to follow me. I have much larger account on Beast System Revealed. And people are starting to find me right away, like, oh my gosh, Travis is back. But I just came back really because I didn't have any place to really promote Who is God Part 2. Like, you know, I'm on Truth Social, and I'm on Truth Social specifically to because Truth Social, the people really are so completely, most of them, not all, completely brainwashed by the QAnon stuff and by Trump, and really do worship him in so many ways. And so I'm on there trying to open some eyes, which is working. But that's been my only social media. So I read on Twitter, and it must be working because, you know, I haven't had a video on this channel go over 5,000 views, not even close. And this was in 2 days. It really took off. So so I'm at no longer _ lost. At no longer _ lost. If you want to, I've got like 66 followers right now, literally 66 when I looked before. So find me, find Alison. She's got a really good feed, really good feed. I was looking through it this morning and yesterday. So I really appreciate you joining me on the fly like this today. It's been really fun
Thanks
hearing
for asking me.
Great.
You know, it's a God thing. Like I told you, I get anxious, but instead of feeling anxious, I was able to just kind of press that down and jump because it's like you said, you know, in your heart when God's saying, hey, come on. Yep. So I'm really thankful that you asked me, so thank you.
Yeah, and the way we did this, you didn't have to overthink it. I wasn't
it's quick and easy.
I wasn't trying to trick you into doing it right away. I just thought, I'm going to get everything all set up.
No, I love it.
So.
Well, I just want to say one more thing. It has rained all day here. Travis and I chose this. I sent him some pictures. We said, oh, this is beautiful. We're going to do it here. It has rained all day. When we got on our test call, it rained. It started sprinkling when he asked me, hey, do you want to do it now? I'm like, let me see. Yep, it stopped raining. It has not rained again. And it's supposed to be raining now, according to the weather. So that is God.
It's probably going to start again right after we get off. It'll start.
I think as soon as we hang up, it's going to start again.
Keep us updated on Twitter about that and see if that happens. So. All right. Well, with
I will, for sure.
Awesome. With that, I think I'll let you go and get back to your day with your pigs and your chickens I've seen walking around behind you and your dogs and all that. My life looks so boring.
They do make life happy. They bring a lot of joy. Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you, Travis.
Well, with that, we're going to go here. And like I always say, I don't know when my next video will be. I never do. But I'm sure it'll be soon. And with that said, we will speak very soon. Thanks again, Alison, for joining us.